What if I told you that one of the most overlooked items sitting behind warehouses, grocery stores, and construction sites could quietly turn into a high-margin home decor business? And most people walk past it every single day without realizing it. Think about that for a second. When was the last time you saw a wooden pallet and thought, there's real money in that? Probably never. But here's where things get interesting. In the United States alone, over 2 billion pallets are in circulation, and hundreds of millions are discarded, recycled, or left unused every year. Now pause and ask yourself this. What happens when something is that abundant, that overlooked, and essentially free or extremely cheap? It creates opportunity. And not just any opportunity, but the kind that rewards creativity more than capital. Now here's the shift that most people miss. When people think of pallets, they think of bulky DIY furniture, coffee tables, bed frames, outdoor seating. And while that market exists, it's also crowded, time-intensive, and often low margin unless you're operating at scale. But what if the real opportunity isn't in furniture at all? What if the real profit is hiding in smaller, higher value, design-focused pieces that people actually impulse buy? Because recent trends in the home decor market show something very clear. Consumers, especially in the US, are moving toward personalized, rustic, eco-friendly, and story-driven home accents. In fact, the handmade and sustainable home decor market has seen consistent growth, with platforms like Etsy reporting millions of monthly searches for terms like rustic wall art, wooden home accents, and reclaimed wood decor. So let me ask you this. If people are actively searching for these products, and the raw materials are practically everywhere, what's stopping you from stepping into that gap? Let me tell you a quick story to make this real. There's someone I'll call Daniel. Daniel lives in a mid-sized city, works a regular 9-to-5 job, and like most people, he was feeling the pressure of rising living costs. One weekend, he helped a friend move into a new apartment, and behind the building, he noticed a stack of old pallets just sitting there. Weathered, rough, ignored. Most people wouldn't give them a second look. But Daniel took a few home, not because he had a business plan, but because he was curious. And here's a question for you. How often do we ignore opportunities simply because they don't look valuable at first glance? At first, Daniel tried building a small table. It took hours, required tools he barely knew how to use, and by the end of it, he realized something important. It wasn't scalable for him. But instead of quitting, he shifted his approach. He broke one of the pallets down into smaller pieces and decided to make something simple. A wall-mounted key holder with a rustic finish. It took him less time, required less precision, and allowed him to focus on design rather than structure. He sanded it down, added a few hooks, stained the wood, and gave it a slightly distressed look. Then he listed it online. Now here's where it gets interesting. That simple piece sold within a few days. Not for a huge amount, but enough to spark something. So he made another, then another, and slowly, he started experimenting: floating shelves, candle holders, small planters, decorative signs. Each one slightly different, each one carrying a bit of character. Now let me ask you this. Why do you think people were buying his pieces instead of cheaper, mass-produced options from big stores? Because what he was selling wasn't just wood. It was uniqueness. It was texture. It was the feeling that no two pieces were exactly the same. And in a world filled with identical products, that difference matters more than most people realize. Here's where the data supports this shift. A growing number of consumers in the US are prioritizing sustainability and individuality in their purchases. Reclaimed materials, especially wood, are seen as both environmentally responsible and aesthetically appealing. And when you combine that with the rise of small space living apartments, condos, smaller homes, you start to see why smaller home accents are outperforming larger furniture in many niches. People don't always have space for a pallet couch, but they will absolutely buy a handcrafted shelf, a wall accent, or a decorative piece that adds personality to their space without taking up room. So let me ask you something. Are you focusing on what's easy to make, or what people actually want to buy? Another layer to this is pricing psychology. Smaller items often feel more affordable, which increases impulse purchases. Someone might hesitate to spend $300 on a table, but $25, $40, even $60 on a unique home accent feels reasonable. And here's the key insight. Those smaller items can often have higher profit margins because they require less material, less time, and can be produced more efficiently once you develop a system. So now the question becomes, would you rather sell one large item occasionally, or multiple smaller items consistently? Let's go a little deeper into what makes these pallet-based accents actually sell. It's not just the fact that they're made from reclaimed wood. It's how they're presented. Think about textures, finishes, and functionality. A simple piece of pallet wood can be transformed depending on how you treat it. Light sanding gives it a raw, rustic feel. A darker stain creates a more refined, modern look. Whitewashing can give it that farmhouse aesthetic that's extremely popular right now. And when you combine that with small functional elements, hooks, compartments, LED lighting, engraved quotes, you start creating products that feel intentional rather than improvised. But here's something I want you to think about carefully. What separates a piece that looks DIY from one that looks high-end handmade? Because that difference is where the money is. It often comes down to small details. Clean edges, smooth finishes, balanced proportions. Even the way the product is photographed can dramatically impact how it's perceived. And this is where many people leave money on the table. They focus on making the product, but not on presenting it in a way that communicates value. Now imagine this scenario. You take a pallet that cost you nothing or maybe a few dollars. You break it down, create 3 or 4 small home accents, and sell each one for $30 to $50. Suddenly, that single pallet has turned into over $100 in potential revenue. And if your process becomes more efficient over time, your hourly return starts to increase. So here's the question. How many people are overlooking this simply because they're thinking too big instead of thinking smart? And we haven't even touched on customization yet, which is where things can really scale. People love personalized items' names, dates, quotes, custom sizes. And when you offer that, you're no longer competing purely on price. You're offering something tailored, something meaningful. That's when your product shifts from being just decor to being something people gift, something they keep, something they value. But let me ask you this before we move forward. If the materials are accessible, the demand is growing, and the entry barrier is relatively low, why isn't everyone doing this? That's exactly what we're going to explore next, along with how to position yourself, where to actually sell these products, and how to turn something simple into a consistent income stream. So if the opportunity is this clear, why isn't everyone turning discarded pallets into profitable home decor? That question is where things start to separate casual interest from real opportunity. Because the truth is, most people don't fail because the idea doesn't work. They fail because they underestimate the importance of positioning. Let me ask you something. If you made a beautiful pallet wood wall shelf today, where would you sell it? And more importantly, how would you make someone choose yours over the hundreds of other options they could scroll past in seconds? This is where platforms and presentation become just as important as the product itself. In the US, marketplaces like Etsy, Facebook Marketplace, and even TikTok Shop have created an environment where small creators can reach thousands of potential buyers without needing a physical store. But here's the catch. Visibility doesn't guarantee sales. The way your product is positioned determines whether people stop scrolling or keep moving. Think about this for a second. When you shop online, what makes you click? Is it just the product? Or is it the image, the lighting, the feeling it creates? That same psychology applies here. Daniel, the guy from earlier, learned this the hard way. His first few listings had plain backgrounds, average lighting, and basic descriptions. They sold, but slowly. Then he made a small change that completely shifted his results. He started staging his products. Instead of photographing a shelf against a blank wall, he placed it in a styled setting. A small plant, a warm light, maybe a book or a candle. Suddenly, the product wasn't just a shelf anymore. It was a lifestyle. And here's the question. Are you selling an object? Or are you selling a feeling? Once he improved his photos, something interesting happened. His click-through rate increased. More people viewed his listings, and with more views came more sales. But he didn't stop there. He started paying attention to what people were actually searching for. Keywords like farmhouse decor, rustic wall shelf, reclaimed wood gift. And this is where data quietly works in your favor. Because when you align what you create with what people are already searching for, you remove a huge part of the guesswork. So let me ask you, are you creating based on what you like, or based on what the market is already telling you it wants? Now let's talk about scalability, because this is where a simple side hustle can turn into something more consistent. At the beginning, everything feels manual. You're cutting, sanding, assembling each piece individually. But over time, patterns start to emerge. You notice which designs sell more, which sizes are more popular, which finishes get the best response. And once you identify those patterns, you can streamline your process. Instead of making 10 different products once, you make one product 10 times with small variations. That's when efficiency starts to increase, and your time starts to compound just like money does. Here's another question to think about. What would happen if you focused on just 3 high-performing designs, instead of trying to do everything at once? Because simplicity often leads to consistency, and consistency is what builds income over time. Another layer that most people overlook is sourcing and preparation. Not all pallets are the same. Some are treated, some are untreated, some are better suited for indoor use than others. Learning how to identify safe, high-quality wood is part of the process. But once you understand it, you gain an advantage. Because now, you're not just picking up random materials, you're selecting inventory. And that mindset shift alone changes how you approach the entire process. Now let's go back to something important: pricing. This is where a lot of beginners either undervalue their work or price themselves out of the market. So let me ask you, how do you decide what your product is worth? Is it based on how long it took you to make, or based on what the customer perceives it to be worth? Because those two things are not always the same. A small, well-designed candle holder might take you an hour to make. But if it looks premium and fits a popular aesthetic, it can sell for far more than you expect. On the other hand, something that took hours but lacks appeal might struggle to sell at all. And this ties into branding, even at a small level. You don't need a big company or a fancy logo to have a brand. Your brand is the feeling people associate with your products. Is it clean and modern? Rustic and cozy? Minimal and functional? The more consistent you are with that identity, the easier it becomes for customers to recognize and trust your work. Let me ask you something that might shift your perspective. What if this isn't just about selling products, but about building a system that turns overlooked materials into consistent value? Because once you understand the system sourcing, creating, presenting and selling, you can repeat it, you can refine it, and you can grow it at your own pace. Now imagine this. You start small, maybe 1 or 2 products a week. You test designs, improve your process, learn what works. Over time, you build a small catalog of items that consistently sell. Maybe you reinvest into better tools, improve your workspace, or even collaborate with someone else. And before you realize it, something that started as curiosity turns into a reliable side income. And for some people, it goes even further. But here's the most important question of all. What's actually stopping you from trying? Is it time? Skill? Uncertainty? Because if you break it down, this is one of those opportunities where the barrier to entry is lower than most people think. But the upside depends on how seriously you approach it. And that brings us back to where we started. A simple wooden pallet. Something most people ignore. Something that doesn't look valuable at first glance. But when you combine creativity, market awareness, and a bit of effort, it transforms into something completely different. So here's what I want you to take away from this. Opportunity doesn't always look like opportunity in the beginning. Sometimes it looks like scrapwood. Sometimes it looks like something everyone else is overlooking. The difference is in how you see it. And more importantly, what you choose to do with it. If this made you look at everyday materials a little differently, I want to hear your thoughts. What's one overlooked item you've seen that might have hidden potential? Drop it in the comments. And if you want more ideas like this practical, Creative ways to turn simple resources into real value. Make sure you subscribe, because we're just getting started.